Welcome back, everyone. I'm the Bad Luck Gamer, and it's time. It's time. You have no idea how excited I am to be getting ready to play and to make videos on the Cosmere RPG. I have been hyped for this game for so long now. I backed it. I got my book today, and you probably know already, I worked with them. The video is coming out apparently this Friday. So this Friday, I am in a live play that was done with some other content creators to kind of show off the Foundry stuff for Cosmere. So on the Brotherwise channel, when that video comes up, I'll be linking it and all that kind of stuff as well. But it's been so fun to be a part of the process. And now I get to start talking about the game, and we are going to be playing it. We're going to be playing Stonewalkers, the first adventure path for the Stormlight game, this next Tuesday, or I guess next Tuesday. So next Tuesday, stay tuned as well. I'm just so excited. There's so much stuff, and the books are so good. So, obviously, I'm going to be talking about the Radiant Paths first, as in lore, they're the ones that we know the least about and what they're capable of, and they're also the coolest thing. These are like the Jedi of Star Wars, right? Everyone's going to want to be one, and I got to say as well, the game is so good. So, if you want to keep up with all stuff Cosmere RPG related, sub to the channel just right now. Subscribe. I'm going to be talking about a lot of this kind of stuff. So if you're interested, you're going to want to see it, and you're going to see it most likely by watching the videos, interacting with the video. So, leave a like and of course, subscribing. But let's go ahead and get started with the Dustbringers, which I love that they have their own armors and the art is so good. I'm so excited. Now, I'm not going to be trying to convince you to play anything in particular. I had a series for a lot of games of why this is awesome, and I don't need to do that. I'm going to tell you what's great about these classes, what's not so great about these classes, and use my years of experience to give you my most educated kind of review of these so you can make your own choices. But the Dustbringers are really, really cool. And I'm starting with Dustbringers mostly because they're like my favorites. I really, really like them. Granted, I took the test on Brandon's site. I always get Windrunner. I have protagonist syndrome, I guess. But Dustbringers are always the ones I'm the most excited about, and this game made them so cool. But if you are new to the Cosmere RPG, which I'm sure many of you are, the Cosmere RPG is less dungeon crawler than a lot of other TTRPGs, which means they're not necessarily going to be completely orientated around the mechanical combat stats. They play a large part of it, and to be fair, Dustbringer is like all about that, but a lot of them have some exterior elements and narrative elements that are important for the game. This is a role player's TTRPG, so if you like telling a story that has really good mechanics backing it up, then you're going to be right at home here in the system. And Dustbringer does not disappoint. So, the Dustbringers, let's talk about their oaths, because oaths are super important to the Radiants. If you're unfamiliar, the Radiants are knightly orders that have to use oaths to kind of access their power, and many of these oaths come from unearthing deep personal truths. And the Dustbringers are an organization specifically around kind of withholding their massive destructive power, as they have one of the most dangerous surges in all the Cosmere, which is division, which is literally the power to divide atoms, or called axiom or axons in the setting, and to make fires with friction and all kinds of stuff. They are incredible. And that is paired with Abrasion, which, rather than how the word would seem, Abrasion makes them incredibly slick, making them super fast, incredibly hard to hit in combat, and making them very hard to get away from, making them some of the most ultimate warriors of the Radiants. But their order is about respecting the power that they are given, and respecting what obligations come with power, and using that in the most prudent and useful way towards greater ends. And in the setting, they have always suffered from some level of ostracization. I don't know the word. They were ostracized because they are the most dangerous order, and many viewed them very negatively, especially because the prior planet that spoilers, I guess, but the prior planet that the humans came from was burnt down essentially by the Surge of Division. So yeah, the Dustbringer's main philosophy is I will seek self-mastery. They're all about mastering their powers to use them for greater good. And it's something that I personally really respect because, in all honesty, if more people acted this way, the world would be a much better place. Now, when you play for the first time and you want to be a Dustbringer, you're going to need to take the first ideal. Now, the first ideal is essentially the same for every order. By swearing the first ideal, you swear to life before death, strength before weakness, and journey before destination. Gives me chills every time. The overall meaning is to live the best life that you can, to always stand up, and it's always about getting there and the work that is required to getting there rather than where you're trying to get. Though, the first ideal means different things for different characters and come with different things, but mechanically how this works is at the level up where you gain access to the first ideal by making a Spren bonds, which in the case of the Dustbringers, you get the Ash Spren, which are super cool. In the material world, essentially, or the physical realm as it's called here in the Cosmere, they appear as Lichtenberg figures that are kind of being etched into whatever surface that they're currently being on. But in the cognitive realm, they appear as ashen humanoids that just kind of look like biker gang members. They all look super cool. And their hair is made of billowing smoke. And they have this cool thing where they can, their body can fall apart into ash and then reform, and they have a kind of gesture where if they're trying to sneer at you particularly, they'll wipe away a part of their jaw to reveal more of the teeth beneath. They're super cool. So you need to make friends with one of these. Now, there's a bunch of lore stuff around this specifically, and I don't want to get into all that here. Many of the Ash Spren do not trust humans after an event called the Recreants, where a lot of Spren died. So your character, for some reason, has been trusted by the Ash Spren to make a Nahel bond, which is kind of the bond between Spren and person, to gain access to your surges. So when you go through that process, you get the first ideal, you say the words, and it's not that simple. Because it's not just saying the words, they have to mean something. So in-game, you get a goal that is speak the first words. And you need to do certain actions to get there. For a Dustbringer, for instance, you're getting towards the first ideal is realizing that the power you wield as a person in general before becoming a Radiant is something that requires mastery. You can't use violence wantonly and all this kind of stuff. When you get there and when you fill in these dots as your GM permits by doing certain events, having certain character moments, you speak the first ideal, you explode in radiant power, and then you gain access to your surges, which we'll go into in a little bit. Lore-wise, technically, Dustbringers don't get access to Division, their powerful destructive surge, until after their second ideal. But that's not technically how it works in the game, so you can do whatever works for your party. If you want to be canon accurate, that's how you're going to go about it. But if you just kind of want to play the game and not worry about that kind of stuff, you get them right out the gate. Though, you get access to some other powers by speaking further ideals. The second ideal, and for the Cosmere heads out there, this is going to be huge. Their second ideal is to control my power, I will control myself. Learning diligence and discipline in order to make the best use of your power. For the third ideal, it's to understand my power. I will understand what power is. And this one is more based on observation through your journey as a Radiant of how powers work. Your own powers, but the powers of like politicians and other types of forces and groups out there. And the fourth ideal for every order is always unique to the Radiant themselves, and usually comes with some very personal growth and a lot of like self-discovery. But for Dustbringers, their whole journey is about self-mastery, and so oftentimes your fourth ideal is going to involve the proper use and full use of your power, using your power for the first time with zero restraint, but in the most properly channeled fashion. Now, the game does recommend that the types of characters to become Dustbringers are agents because of Abrasion. The speed and wiliness of agents pairs really, really well with Abrasion, which uses speed, so it makes a lot of sense. Hunter has a lot of very offensive capabilities, and that also works very well with the overall destructiveness of Dustbringer. And Scholar is more, well, one, Division actually uses intellect as its core stat, so Scholar makes a lot of sense, but narratively as well, Ashspren are drawn to people who are interested in the use and the way things are put together. They break things down to find out how they work together. And it's very interesting. It gives a very like intellectual aspects to the overall destructive order, which I actually really like narratively speaking. Stat-wise, though, I mean, Scholar makes a lot of sense because you're going to use a lot of intellect with Division, and Agent for a lot of speed stuff. Hunter, it can be, you know, one way or the other. Honestly, in my experience with the game so far, pick whatever paths. You don't have to be these paths to pick it. This is just what they recommend because they have some kind of aligning themes, but that's the only reason. But I'm sure you are ready to just get down to the talents. What do you get as a Dustbringer? Well, here it is. So these sheets are all super cool. They're probably blocking my face right now. It's kind of hard with this setup, but it is what it is. But it's really cool. So let's go over the Ashspren stuff first. Now, most Radiants have the same general talents in their Spren bond besides a fusion technique, which combines the elements of their two surges. For Dustbringers specifically, you get Searing Dust Storm, which is super cool. Now, all that's required is you speak the first ideal, which is super easy to do. And then you spend Investiture to kick up an obscuring cloud of dust as you move. Enemies in this cloud take extra damage equal to your ranks in discipline. Now, this is not necessarily the full thing. These are just like little blurbs. So how this actually works is Searing Dust Storm is when you use a move action to move along any solid surface, you can spend one Investiture or more to kick up an obscuring cloud of dust in the spaces you move through. And these are spaces of your choice, so they don't have to be every single space. Now, this cloud remains for a number of turns equal to the amount of investiture you put into it. So the more investiture, the longer the cloud lasts. Now, enemies within this cloud that take damage for the first time during a round take increased damage equal to your ranks in the discipline. So what this cloud does is enhances damage of enemies who are in it. So you're going to want to maneuver enemies into these spaces or find ways to get into an enemy space to use this ability. But what it does is it makes your enemies take a bunch of extra damage at least once per round, which is really cool. And it's something that I think really, really is interesting as far as the Dustbringer. It's the real dust part of it, and I think that's super cool. But let's go ahead and take a look at their two surges, which, by the way, how surges generally work is every Radiant Order shares a surge with another Radiant Order. And since every Radiant Order has two surges, you share a surge with two orders. So in the Dustbringer's case, we share Abrasion with Edge Dancers, and we share Division with Skybreakers. So these talents are going to be the same ones that they have access to. The unique thing for Dustbringers mostly comes with that dust cloud that I mentioned before, and of course, the overall narrative and combination of your abilities. So let's talk about Abrasion. So with Abrasion, its stats are based on speed. So when you use this as a skill, you're going to want to have a high speed. Now, when you have the Abrasion Surge, you gain the core activation ability, which more or less just makes an object super slippery that you touch. And it makes it harder to hold on to. Enemies will need to make an agility test against your abrasion score, so whatever ranks you have in that. It's something where with ingenuitive use of abrasion can be insanely good. Now, if you want to make an enemy's weapon, for instance, slippery in their hand so they drop it, you're going to need to make a test against their physical defense. So something to keep in mind, but you can definitely mess with people with abrasion. It's super cool. But in addition to this, you can infuse yourself with abrasion and you gain 2 abilities. You gain skate, which you can as a free action move by spending 2 focus points as long as you're moving in a straight line. That's insanely good because it's a free move action in a game like, you know, any other TTRPG. So free movements are good, even though it does cost you 2 focus points. You can get those back at least with a recovery check, not too bad. And you get slide. Slide is less useful in combat normally, but whenever you are, you know, moving through a tight space, you count as being 1 size smaller when squeezing through spaces, and you gain advantage on tests to escape restraints that hold you via friction or pressure. So like being tied by a rope or being grappled in general. So yeah, you are slippery and hard to keep hold of. Now, the talents are pretty cool. Starting off with frictionless motion. While you're infused with your abrasion, your movement rate is increased by 10 feet, and you ignore the slow condition that any slow conditions imposed by difficult terrain, climbing, crawling, or swimming. So even swimming, your character just slides through the water, which is super cool. And that 10 feet of movement is massive in this game. Movement increases are actually somewhat hard to get. You need either a high speed score or something like shard plate. So this is really, really good. Next, we have graceful skating, which whenever you use the skate action, the one I mentioned before that you just move as a free action in a straight line. Well, now you aren't moving just in a straight line, which is insanely good. So it's a free move anywhere action, though it still costs you 2 focus points. Slippery target is also really cool. While you're infused with your abrasion, attacks can't graze you, and reactive strikes gain disadvantage. With the inability to be grazed, that's huge. Graze is this system's way of kind of removing the feel bad moments of missing attacks, so an enemy can always just choose to graze you with a focus action, except not anymore as long as you have slippery target, which makes your character incredibly difficult to deal with. So as a Dustbringer, you're insanely good in combat. You have insane mobility, and you can't be nicked. Enemies have to hit you dead on, which is very difficult in this system. The last one down this side of the chart is Slick Combatant. While you're infused with Abrasion, you can interrupt a move action with any other action, and you deal extra damage on a mid-movement attack. The extra damage, as indicated by this, is an additional D4 for the attack, and this increases by a die step for every rank you have. So at the second rank of this, it deals D6 and then D8 and so on and so forth. But the GM can spend a complication you roll with any attacks made during this to make you slip and fall prone. So you do have to be careful, but Slick Combatant is really good. And in this system specifically, you can't break up movement. So when you move, you're where you're at, and then you need to, do another move action if you want to go anywhere else. Well, with Slick Combatant, you don't have to do that anymore, which is really good because we have a lot of movement as a Dustbringer with Abrasion. So, and with Skate, that's even better. So we have a lot to go off of here when it comes to just pure combat mobility and utter slipperiness. Now, on the other side of the chart here, we have reverse abrasion. Reverse abrasion, which makes no sense as a word because abrasiveness is something that has higher friction, so whatever. But reverse abrasion allows you to increase the friction of an object or area. So you can infuse things like walls, ground, and this gives advantage with athletics checks and checks to climb or move over those objects, and can ignore things like difficult terrain. So you can help your allies climb up a hill by giving them advantage by making that wall more easy to cling on to, which is really cool. Stormlight Reclamation is something you're going to see in a lot of these surges, where if you infuse an object with some investiture, you can take that investiture back after you're done using it if you no longer need to use it. That is very, very important. Distant Surge Binding is less interesting in Abrasion, but more interesting for Division, but we'll get to that. Distant Surge Binding allows you to use your powers as though you had a 20-foot reach, which is insanely good because now you don't have to be touching an enemy to make them drop their weapon. Now you can just make their weapon slippery in their grasp as long as they're within 20 feet. Insanely good. But the best part about this side of the chart is Smooth Operator. So while you have investiture, so you don't have to be infused with your Abrasion, you are infused with Abrasion, and it costs you one fewer focus point to skate. So skate becomes one focus point rather than two, which means more mobility, less worry about focus, really, really good. But now you don't need to spend an action giving yourself Abrasion in order to use a lot of these features on yourself, which most of these you'll see only work while you're infused with Abrasion. So Smooth Operator is something you're going to want to pick up as soon as you can. Division, though, this one's based on intellect, and I don't remember if I mentioned with Abrasion, but it's based on speed. So, make sure you have a high speed set. But Division, this one is the destructive one. It's really, really cool because essentially you just atomize things with your ability. So for 2 actions, base surge, you can target an object or character and you just try to blow them up. So you can target a character and you can spend 1 investiture to make a melee division attack against the spiritual defense of the target. So they can be really good in combat, but their spiritual defense isn't high. They're going to be vulnerable to this, and this does spirit damage. Spirit damage is almost unblockable. There's no armors really that block this besides shard plate. So spirit damage is really, really nasty. So it doesn't matter how big and bulky the target is in front of you. If they don't got a good spirit defense, they're getting atomized. Now they take 3d4 spirit damage, but the die increase in size for every rank you have. So that's only the first rank. But at the second rank, it's 3d6, 3d8, so on and so forth. It's really, really cool. And because this is considered a strike or an attack by any normal amount, you can use the graze function to just deal the damage to your to the target if you miss by spending a focus. Now, for grazes normally, that's just the dice damage, but that's more than enough for division. And by the way, I should mention as well, as normal for any strikes in this system, like if you're using a sword strike or anything, you add your modifier to that strike. So modifiers in this are stat plus rank, right? So if you had 2 points in division and an intellect of 3, that's +5, which would be then 3d6 plus 5 damage, massive amount of damage. If you miss, well, then it's still just 3d6 damage, which is a lot. And by the way, if an enemy is ever reduced to 0 health by this, they just die and crumble to dust and just blow away. So yeah, that's really strong. And then there's targeting objects or areas. This allows you to just destroy your choice of things. You get to choose what things in that area. You don't even have to necessarily just worry about your hitboxes. So you spend investiture equal to the size of the thing you wish to destroy, and then you choose how certain things are destroyed and in what way they are destroyed. Really, really useful in a lot of ways. For instance, you could write words, very womanly art, but whatever, on a wall by just placing your hand on it and using your division, which is great for delivering messages to people. So, it's something that I think is very cool as a out of combat thing, but in combat as well, it's really good, though you do need to worry about using division under pressure, which is very difficult to do. So if you're trying to use division while in combat or in any high stress situations, you need to hit certain DCs with that intellect plus rank I mentioned before. So in the early game, if you get Dustbringer early, the best you're going to probably have is +5, maybe +6, depending if we count 5th level. And you need to hit, for things like vapors and gases, which you're probably never going to use it on, a DC 5. Liquids like blood, water, oil, DC 10. Now that's difficult, but not too unmanageable. But let's talk about like metals and stuff that you actually are going to want to destroy. That's a DC 20. That's rough. You need to roll a 14 or higher in the best circumstances. So during combat, don't just think you can just destroy the enemy's weapon or their armor willy-nilly. At least early game, that's going to be much more difficult. Later game, it gets a lot easier, but early game, you're going to want to be careful. But let's take a look at the talents because they're really cool. And if you like destruction, well, here we go. So right off the bat, we get bodily decay. When you hit with a division attack, you can spend an opportunity to cause one target of that attack to suffer an injury. This is a major debilitation and will make the enemy suffer for the rest of the combat as a part of them just blows away into dust. Next, we have igniting division. When you use division, spend one or more investiture to light the target's space and the target itself on fire, dealing ongoing damage equal to your division modifier, the full modifier, not just your ranks. That's insanely cool. Though, doing this is going to require you to make a division under pressure check, but any spaces you light on fire and any targets that are currently on fire will suffer 5 damage the first time they enter it or at the beginning of the target's turn until the fire goes out. And when you spend multiple investiture, that keeps them on fire for multiple rounds. So 4 investiture, 4 rounds of burning. Now, enemies can attempt to help them to remove the investiture, rolling a physical check, some kind of check against your division DC, but that's spending enemy actions to remove the damage. A very devastating effect. That is dangerous in this game. Losing even 5 HP per round is going to kill whatever character is currently on fire. Then we have Gout of Flame. It's just an area version of the attack. You spend 3 investiture to make a division attack versus the physical against the physical defense of each target in an area 1 size larger than normal. So when it talks about sizes or areas for affecting things, and I kind of mentioned this before, but we use the surge scaling chart. So when it says size, this is typically squares or size of a thing that you're currently affecting. So at 2 ranks, you normally can affect like a medium-sized creature or square, right? Well, now at 2 ranks, it would be 10 feet large. And if you have 5 ranks, which is the max you can have in any skill in this game, then you would increase it to 25 rather than 20, which is a large area to affect enemies in with your division powers. So this is already a devastating effect, and you can always spend investiture when making Gout of Flame to also light the area on fire, which is nuts. Then we have devastating division. When you roll damage for division, roll an additional damage die. So rather than 3d6, you're going to be rolling 4d6. It's just extra damage, but hey, it's just free extra damage. That's just good in general. On the other side of the chart here, we have Eroding Escape. So you spend 1 or more investiture to end any effects that are currently restraining or immobilizing your character, as long as that's some kind of effect that can be eroded. Now, it might not destroy the object completely, but create enough space for you to move at the GM's discretion. But it's just a free get out of jail card, which is really, really cool. Then we have Spark Sending, the most dangerous effect that I can think of in here, because Spark Sending increases the range from melee to 20 feet. And then Inescapable Spark is even worse, because then it becomes the range of your Sprenbon. The Sprenbon can get up to 100 feet. And not only that, but you no longer need line of sight as long as you can sense the target in some way or form. And enemies can no longer brace against your division in an attempt to reduce the damage. So if you hear some enemies behind like a large shield wall, you can place your hand on a shield and the spark will circle around and burst everyone on the other side in flames. That's nuts. And of course, this can work even with Gout of Flame. So you can do massive fire area damage with this at pretty good ranges. And last but not least, we have Unleashed Entropy, which it costs you 1 fewer action to use the division skill, so it's 1 action rather than 2. And your division under pressure DC is reduced by 5, making most checks very easy to do. So, yeah, the Dustbringer is devastating. It is the incarnation of a disaster. You move onto the battlefield with grace and agility like no other, and with every swing and every step you leave dust and devastation in your path. It's so cool. And I love the ideals. I love every aspect of how they generally work. And I love how the narrative and the mechanical really blend in. If you want to play the most badass Radiant Warrior with the coolest spren in the game, you're going to want to play a Dustbringer. But hey, that's just my opinion, and you can share your opinions about this down in the comments below. Let me know, hey, what do you think about the Dustbringers? Do you think they're cool like I do, or are you wrong? And of course, as I mentioned before, if you want to see more Cosmere content, please like the video and subscribe. Liking the video gets other people into the game, which is only good for us, and subscribing to the channel, make sure, or at least helps, depending, you see my content as it comes out, because I'm going to be coming out with videos for each of the Radiant Orders in addition to the heroic paths, and I'm going to be talking about the system in general. And don't forget, we have a live play that's going to be starting next Tuesday, as we're going to be going through Stonewalkers. But that's going to be it for me. Thank you all so much for watching. Good luck with your games. Leave the bad luck to me, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye.